All right then. So, Kate, it is so good to see you again, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. This is always wonderful to chat.
Great. And so I think one thing that I do want to mention before we get started is that one of the reasons that I reached out to you was that you really used your difference to your advantage, which is something that I really admire about people. So why don't we get started with this one single question as to how did you make your way to Arcadia?
Yes. Well, yes, it's been what's great is it's 8 years. So I get to reflect on this long path now, and it all makes sense in retrospect, right? Like if you look back 8 years, it's like, oh, everything was supposed to happen this way. But let me assure you that most career paths are not A to Z, most lives are not A to Z. And so for people listening who want to feel that, they need to have a plan or their plan's not working out, most of the times in life, there's curveballs and pivots, and it's how you react to those things and set yourself up. That's the most important thing. So about 8 years ago, I was a corporate attorney by background. So I spent my 20s in school. I got a master's degree and a law degree, and then was a corporate attorney doing in America what's called bet the company litigation. So sort of big high stakes litigation for big corporations. And you learn a lot of great skills as a litigator at that sort of level. Precision and analysis and writing. But we had just had our first child, who was about to turn 9 on Tuesday. So I can always kind of mark it by that time frame. And I really just felt a stronger desire to make an impact and to do something, to leave the world a better place. There's just moments of clarity that you sort of know that you want to make an impact in a different way. And so I was a lawyer with no business experience, and so thought, how can I transition to a startup world, to a business world? And I really, decided through a lot of, talking to friends and sort of figuring it out that law was my wedge, right? So I could use the thing I had, which was knowledge of law and regulation and how policies made and all those things, to really enter a sector that I had no experience in. And energy is a wonderful, complicated, regulated, crazy sector that actually for a lawyer, it made a lot of sense. I could have a pretty good pitch of why being a lawyer is something that can help in this industry. And so I actually cold reached out to Kieran. He had about a website, and that's about it. And so was just able to sort of parlay what I saw as a unique advantage into a story of why I should do a career pivot. And again, it never makes sense in those moments, but then you look back and it makes total sense, and the story is easy to tell. But there's a lot of variation that has to happen over time to kind of make that seem so simple.
Absolutely. And I also remember that in one of your interviews, you mentioned that, you looked at what industries are regulated, and they tend to be usually health and energy. And energy anyway is really hard to get into, right? And just really hard to execute as well. So why did you pick energy?
So, it's a really big problem, which I think attracts me. So, and as is healthcare, right? But one of the things that I love about energy, and that I feel so fortunate now in retrospect to have all borne out, is energy is a decades long problem. It's a generation long problem. And I think the meatiness of that, in one ways that makes it a hard to enter sector, right? It's a little bit different than other sectors. It's big, it's older, all those things sort of that maybe make energy a little intimidating.
Right.
I see that as like, wow, this is a really not hairy ball of a problem that's going to take decades and generations to solve. And I think that's one of the huge, what I advise sort of younger people is really pick a problem that you want to solve. Pick a company, sure, that's great. But if you want to have a career and really, I think, have a lot of like reward in that career, get into a sector and pick a problem that is long enough for you to kind of keep solving it and to keep pushing it forward. And I think,
Right.
What's been really amazing you've been in the sector a while, but what's been really amazing in the last, several years is it does feel like the sector is growing and moving and getting more sort of kinetic energy as it kind of rolls along. And so, my advice to folks is pick a problem that you want to solve. And if it's a big problem, you can do that and gain expertise and become a master in that problem for your whole career, which is really rewarding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is a great segue to my next question, which is, what does Arcadia really do?
That's a great question. So Arcadia is we are a climate tech company, which means we're a software company, and we're making a data platform. So we connect customers, direct consumer customers, business customers, to their energy data. Which maybe that, okay, how hard is it to get energy data? Well, what's great
Yeah.
about energy is that there's a lot of different utilities around the world. So we have connection to about 10,000 utilities, just to give you kind of a size and scale there.
In countries?
In 54 countries. So,
Wow.
we're connecting to a good part of the population around the world. And that's a really, interesting and great sort of value to provide a customer, because if you have energy data, you can start doing really new, cool, and innovative things, which is how, we believe you can drive sort of the innovation that you need to fix climate change faster. So we do everything from provide energy data to EV manufacturers, to make consumer apps, to tell you, when to charge, how much it's going to cost. We're powering a majority of the residential solar proposals in the United States. And then our direct-to-consumer product that sort of started all this it's called Community Solar in the US. And that is right now specific to the US. So some of your listeners might not have the concept, but it's basically shared solar. So if it's not rooftop solar, it's solar in a field that then a community can sort of take part in. And we're the largest, using our data platform, we're the largest manager of community solar in the US. We have about 400,000 customers on our platform using that.
Yeah. And I think just double clicking on community solar. So community solar also, if I'm not wrong, drives a large majority of your growth, right, in the company. But you also have captured. Sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, so we're about 50-50 right now. Is that, it's the data platform that really is the underlying technology of all of our businesses.
Right.
And we directly sell the platform to sort of businesses to make their own consumer products. And then through the history of Arcadia, we have started our own direct consumer business, which is community solar, which is about half of our growth and revenue right now.
Right. And then you also captured wind. So I'm curious, what has the trajectory looked like for you, and why did you pick community solar first, or did it just grow because it grew? I'm curious, what's the trajectory been like?
Yeah, so Arcadia is now 8 going on 9 years old, so we're sort of in the maturing startup trajectory. So the kernel of Arcadia has really always been the same, which is that consumers are going to drive innovation faster than the utility. So if you wind back 10 years ago, you're really people were looking to the utility to innovate, make new consumer products, get EVs going faster, deploy more solar. And really the insight of Arcadia, I think, is twofold. One is that the consumer, like every other market, we really in the world, can change things faster than sort of a monopoly regulated utility. And then the second insight we have is if you can capture their data and their payment flows between the utility, that's really where you can start to use the customer as a wedge to then be able to drive that innovation. So consumers are going to drive innovation, and then the way you do that is basically billing and data. So those insights have stayed, and then it's all in service to impact. If that's not obvious, it's all in service to sort of making and driving innovation to get to the fossil, the decarbonized future faster. And so those parts of Arcadia have always remained. But it started in a very different place. We sold wind RECs, which are wind renewable energy certificates. This is what the product we started go to market with, 8-9 years ago. And that was basically match your energy usage to a wind certificate coming out of Texas or Oklahoma. And then there was no other products on the market. I mean, this is what's so interesting about growing a startup is you really have to be able to react to what's new, what's coming, where can you innovate? And then fast forward about 3-4 years into the company, there's a little bit of community solar starting in a state called Massachusetts. And we really pushed. I mean, we really sort of drove market expansion. We hired a policy team. We convinced regulators this was a great product. And so we really kind of launched the direct-to-consumer community solar market in America. It's now 14 states. the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a big US federal bill, is going to sort of incentivize this as well. So we think it's the fastest growing solar sector now. And we think there's going to be, multiple gigawatts per year of community solar being built. And then honestly, the data platform, sort of our third iteration of Arcadia, that was really market pull. We started to hear from businesses, in about 2019, 2020, basically asking us for energy data. And we had built this platform for our own use to do the WindRec product, to do the, community solar. And then we really sort of saw the opportunity to enable other businesses because they started to call us. I mean, it was really, that wonderful moment where you're like, oh, this is even bigger than we thought it could be. And now I think we're so excited because to fix climate, you need 1,000 solutions, right? And, we love that we launched community solar. It's a wonderful energy product where consumers get to guaranteed savings, local renewable power, but we're going to need 10,000 companies doing 10,000 different things. And so we're excited to really enable that innovation and scale through our data platform.
Wow, it's pretty interesting that you work with so many utility companies. And I think one of the most daunting experiences that startups share with us is that, it's really hard to work with utilities because of whatever reason, right? So I'm curious, how are you going about it? And do you have a special team in place that works with them or anything of that sort?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've built technology, right? So this is how we can scale to 10,000 utilities, is because we built technologies that sort of automates a lot of the data capture for us, right? I mean, you can't we're basically interacting with about 2.5 million bills or invoices a month from utility. We're pulling 40,000 tariffs a month. So at that scale, you really have to build software to do it sort of at the scale we're at. And so that's what a lot of the work we've done the last 8 years is really make the connections with utilities, the technical connections, the behind the scene connections. And, we have a very large team that is basically interacting with the utilities technology and sort of their websites on a daily basis because, technology changes and it's brittle. And so that's really a big investment area we make, is to have, the widest data coverage, the best data coverage. And there's a lot of maintenance that you have to do in order to keep 10,000 sort of, pipes flowing. There's a lot of investment we have to make. It's not a problem that you just sort of solve and then walk away from. It's really a continuous build and investment and optimization, right? I mean, technology changes, our tools change. And so we started with spreadsheets 8 years ago. That's where we were, sort of doing all this in spreadsheets. And now, it's grown to sort of 10,000 pretty automatic connections.
Wow. Pretty solid. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, this is the story of, you don't start at 10,000, you start at spreadsheets and you build your way to 10,000 over time.
So small becomes big, essentially.
Exactly. Yes.
Pretty cool. So you are now one of the few companies in the energy space that have started as a startup, but have gone to become really huge. I'd love to double click on how your journey was, right, to get there. And sort of, so my question there is that how did you really identify that you needed to scale and change things internally? It's obviously not driven by, the amount of funding that you've received. And so as you grew, how did you identify what needs to change, both in terms of systems and leadership?
Yeah, I mean, that is another continuous thing. So, going sort of tying a couple ideas together, the market you're in is really important, because if you have a big market and you continue to put one step in front of the other, year after year, day after day, it really gives you the opportunity to keep growing, right? I mean, I think this is something that has proven to be amazing about the energy market, is that it is huge. It is huge today. And then if you sort of believe some of the studies that to decarbonize that market, we're going to put $100 trillion as a global economy into decarbonization in the next 25 years. So it's a huge market that's just going to get big. And so choosing your market and being in a market that has that type of scale means there's a lot of problems to solve. There's a lot of things to build. There's a lot of things to create value. And so, that's just the first thing is you get scale because you're able to solve enough problems and you're able to sort of provide value to customers in enough ways. And because there's some businesses in some markets that there might be only one problem to solve, and you can create a great business, but it can't maybe be a generational or a decades long business, where I think energy startups have the potential to really impact on a decades long scale. So, when you're building, we now have about 800 employees globally. We have about half of our staff is in Chennai, India. So that's been a wonderful thing to incorporate into how we operate. And you really do shift at some point along the way from, first you really hire generalists, right? Generalists in a startup are like gold. They can do everything. They can, they're smart people who can do everything. They are worth their weight in gold. And then over time, you really need to bring in managers, people who know how to activate other people. And then sort of where we're getting to now is you want specialists. You want somebody who knows how to do that one thing at a company really well. And then you have sort of executives and leaders who activate the specialist. And so you really move from this model of smart generalist to specialist to then like managers who activate specialists to do amazing things. And, it's really a difference in how you operate, because you have to when you get to sort of the 800 person scale. And then, then you're talking about coordination and metrics and alignment in a way that when there was 3 people in a room, you just sort of looked at each other and said, great, let's launch. This is fantastic. And so I miss those days. Those 3-4 person days are some of my, happiest memories at Arcadia. The impact we can make, though, now as a global company with 800 people is beyond what we could have ever done with 3. And so that's the balance, is you sort of trade the quick, fun, all in a room to like the impact and scale and growth that we can drive as a bigger company. And, I'm so happy to have gone through both sides of that journey, but it's pretty cool to watch how fast we can go, how much we can do, the smart, amazing people that we work with every day. It's very humbling, and I have a lot of gratitude for that.
That's absolutely right. And I think one thing that you also said is that, since you are in such a large market, there is so much to do. You need to innovate so much. And as human beings who are, who want to essentially achieve, or rather fulfill our highest, truest selves, it's very important to not only have that growth mentality, but also an early stage mentality, right? Because then how else do you innovate? So I'm curious,
Yeah.
do you have any systems in place that help you do that? Because as organizations get big, it's just very hard to keep track. So what do you do?
So, part of it is, it starts with sort of who you hire in your culture, right? Like, at the very basic level, especially now, Arcadia is now a mostly hybrid company. And so your culture becomes really important, of sort of who you invite to come solve these problems with, and like how they solve the problems. And so, we are really looking for people who are curious, who are, impact motivated. Like, one of the things I love about Arcadia, and it's probably, the best thing I think about Arcadia, is that we are really motivated by impact. We have a culture that genuinely thinks energy data can save the world. And that creates a really natural passion to do things, right? To create, to innovate. We have, some of our Slack channels are just so amazing, with people having creative ideas and talking about the industry. And so I think if you really start from a kernel, which again, this is so much gratitude for this, if you start with a kernel of people around the table, even if it's 800 people, are all there because they want to impact and decarbonize the world. And like, that can get you really far in terms of motivation and innovation and energy and passion. And so, I think, and it's not, so that really starts with our culture, who we hire, who we bring in. And I actually think, more than any system, it's who you have as your sort of inputs around the table probably drives so much of what you are as a company. And then I think, if you do think about our systems and process, we really focus on sort of our top metrics, right? So we want to sort of democratize information at Arcadia. So we share metrics and financials and sort of the strategy of where we're going to then empower people to go help us solve these problems. And so I think that's really important too, even though we're now starting to be a big company, is we really do want everybody, you know, at our global all hands, we share our financials, we share our goals, we share our, you know, strategy, we share, you know, after our board meeting, we share a lot of what we told the board to our 800 employees. And so I think trying to drive with transparency so that people feel responsible and included in the value creation, the problem solving is really important. We're also, you know, we try to talk about the customer a lot, right? So how do we bring what our sales team and our commercial team is hearing into the rest of the company, I think is an important sort of third point that we, you know, it's harder at 800 people, right? Like those communication points, but trying to be intentional about what the market says about our product, what, you know, customers say about our product. I think that's really important too, to kind of push people to feel responsible to create value for them again and again and again.
Right. That's really interesting. And, you know, I think it's not only in large organizations, or rather, I'd say not only in small organizations, but also in large organizations. It's so important to be transparent. And, you know, as I was chief of staff at this women's health company.
Yeah.
And to your point of, you know, people being motivated to solve this problem, there were times when, you know, teams did not perform well, et cetera, et cetera. So the only thing that drove them was, we are here to impact women's health. We are here to make sure that women feel better. And, you know, even though we did not perform well this past month, we're going to make sure that we do whatever is required of us to make sure that women feel better, you know, that really, and the transparency, as you said, really.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that's like, if you people need to be self-motivated. I mean, if you're a manager who just has to tell somebody what to do every day, you're not getting any leverage out of them. And so you really do need to find that way to self-motivate. And I mean, I think you're repeating and seeing that same point of like, if people get passionate and want to solve women's health, they will do it they'll think about it at different hours. They'll get creative in different ways. And like, that's really what leverage is that spark for people.
Absolutely. Well, I think the other thing that I'd love to touch upon is just the finance piece. I think, so as I was looking at your cap table, it was very interesting that, you know, you have JP Morgan, and then you also have Tiger Global. And then I also remember that, you know, in your initial days, you were partnering with MCJ. So, you know, I'm actually curious, how have you planned fundraising over the years, or what are you seeing, you know, in terms of like these companies, energy companies and climate tech companies in general? How do they plan, you know, fundraising, not only in terms of timing, but also in terms of the kind of stakeholders that they are reaching out to?
Yeah. So, you know, we raised our Series A all the way back, I want to say in 2017 or 2016, which is a lifetime ago in ventures. You know, it's been amazing to watch how much new venture capital and funds are created specifically around climate. I think that is like a wonderful thing that we need to, you know, hasten all this innovation. So, but when we were raising, you know, back in the day, there weren't really climate tech company, you know, climate funds yet. And so we were telling a story more about market size. Our earliest Series A investor is a fund called Energy Impact Partners, which has now grown to be a huge multi-billion-dollar fund. We were their first investment, which is really a cool, you know, it's been awesome to watch them grow and change. But now there's dedicated climate funds and, you know, climate technology funds. And I think there's a lot more openness to seeing climate tech as a sector and a segment, rather than like, oh, you're like a fintech in energy, or you're like this in energy. And I think that's really where in the early days, there was more of the, you know, we had to do a like, oh, we're this, but for energy. And now I think the sector is just, it's actually a segment. I think it's much more well understood of sort of where you know, what innovations are needed for decarbonization, what innovations are needed sort of for the energy transition. And that I think makes it a little easier for founders, because they don't have to sort of make up a new template. They can at least knock on a door that understands basically, you know, I mean, if you say like microgrids and virtual power plant, those are concepts that were like not really talked about 8 years ago when we were getting started. So I think that's the first thing to say, is just that you're entering a financing world that I understands climate tech in a way. And I think I do think, we're obviously in a sort of macroeconomic moment where growth is slowing down. People are, a little skittish as if we're going to go into recession. There's high interest rates, all those things. I do continue to believe and see that climate tech, if you pitch your story right, is shielded from that a bit, right? So we are, our valuations have not gone down as far as, other technology companies or fintech companies. I think that investors do really understand and buy into the narrative that this is a market that is separate from macroeconomic trends, that, decarbonization is the largest growth opportunity of our generation. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen because it's good business. And so it's shielded a little bit from the macro trends. I also don't think that it's a vanity or luxury thing, right? People are still, in what we're seeing, at least, even in sort of these squishy gray times, people are still investing in carbon accounting and climate innovation. And, we have not, we're talking to every segment of that value chain of sort of, energy transition, and our phone is still very, very warm. And so we have not seen any slowdown in segments because, oh, we're not investing in climate, solutions anymore. Oh, we're not investing in sustainability or carbon accounting. We haven't seen any slowdown sort of at the market level, which I think investors will understand that and see that too. So I guess in my two takeaways would be, believe that you have an actual segment now that you can pitch, and also believe that you don't have to follow the same narrative of growth is slowing, recession coming, that investors are willing to sort of see climate tech as a slightly different category than the rest, which is awesome.
Right. And I also see, to your point that it's shielded from all these macro events, I also feel that investors now are looking for more sustainable themes. So themes such as decarbonization, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Your sky is orange, unfortunately, today. So, I mean, you can't run away.
Yeah. No, you can't run. I mean, I guess the other side of that is, like, I do think there's going to be a lot of, we're still early in the climate tech life cycle. And so I think there is still yet to be winners and losers, right? So people they still need to build a good business model, right? You can't just go in there and be like, I'm in a big market and you should fund me. You need to build a good business. You need to build, a business that has a path to profitability and growth. And there's going to be consolidation. Little companies are going to, fail to scale. And I think then you're going to have sort of bigger companies come in and buy them or take over their market. And so I will say you still have to perform, right? Like you're never given a pass. Even if you're in a great market with all this money coming in, like you still have to build a good business.
And is there any difference in terms of your pitch to, say, a large financial institution like a JP Morgan, which is also a bank in itself, versus any other venture capital fund?
I actually don't think so. I think, I'm like actually thinking through, did we pitch them differently? I don't think so. I think the story that we've always said has really been the same, which is centered on how large the market is and really how big our moat is. To get data from 10,000 utilities, it took us years to build, and we're, I think we're just scratching the surface. And so I think we feel pretty confident in both the largeness of our solution and also sort of the head start. And you can't take a head start for granted. You have to keep innovating. That drives us every day. But those two sort of pieces we feel, and then the third thing is how fast the market's changing. Like being in this market for 8 years, and you've probably just experienced this too, of there are more companies starting every day. There are more amazing people who want to get into the sector. I mean, the last 3-4 years has been a boom in this industry in a way that's just amazing to see. But I think, it's people feel that the market is really turning on and revving. And so I think those three things are sort of our central pitch, regardless of who we're now. This is all obviously later stage investments. When we were pitching the Series A, I mean, we sometimes go look at that deck, and it's a very, it's a humbling experience where you start, but that's where you have to start.
Yeah, well, that's everyone's story. So totally get that. I think the other thing that I've been curious about is that, we've spoken about UrjaNet as well. And as you grow big and as you want to sort of, expand into other countries as well, you make acquisitions, right? So I'm actually curious, I mean, what is it that you really look for when you are making these acquisitions? And what are you excited about when you see a company?
Yes, we've made 5 acquisitions, I think, in 2 years. So we've started to really get good at that muscle. We've acquired many different companies so we've acquired an acquisition channel, we've acquired a tariff database, we've acquired UrjaNet, which had a lot of the commercial data. So Arcadia brought a lot of residential data, UrjaNet had commercial data. We're looking for companies that basically fill out our roadmap, right? I mean, it sounds sort of simple to say, but you want to invest in M&A if it's something that can accelerate sort of the path to who you want to be when you grow up, right? And so it's looking for companies and opportunities that we think, won't throw us off course, right? It's a risk whenever you sort of merge or acquire. There's cultural risk, there's focus risk, there's all these things that can be a drag. And so you really have to balance that with the certainty over, a couple months of diligence and talking about it, that this piece of the puzzle will accelerate basically where you want to go because you see very clearly where it fits in. And I think what has really helped us too is everybody we're picking up is the same, motivated by the same mission. And, I don't know what it would be like to acquire a company that, felt bland or didn't have people who were passionate about making a change. We've been really fortunate to sort of, all of our pieces have really inherited folks who get excited about the same nerdy energy stuff that we get excited about, and to get excited about like how, energy data is like tariffs are going to change the world. And so that makes it really easy. So it's advancing the roadmap and cultural fit. And then obviously months of diligence in their financial models and making tabs and Excel sheets and all that stuff to make sure it's a good business and all that stuff too.
So since you talked about Excel sheets, are there like 1 or 2 things that you totally need to take into account internally before you even start making acquisitions? Because now balance sheet is paramount, right? After the escalated prices, everyone's re-looking at their financial statements. So how do you sort of make sure that you're ready?
Yeah, I mean, you want to, and we've had this discussion about various acquisitions. Like you definitely don't want to make your balance sheet or your plan weaker because you acquire, right? So do you have do you really have the capital to acquire a company? Do you really have the bandwidth to ingest, train, and integrate another company? Because if you acquire a company with 80 people and you don't have time to sort of onboard them or sort of know how they fit in the organization, then you're going to lose a lot of value. So, do you have the capital? Do you have the sort of internal resources? Those I think are the 2 big things. And then I do think you have to have a sense of how can I do what they were doing better or more, right? So we've acquired great companies that were growing and were by themselves really interesting, which is what, sort of tipped our hat. But we also saw that like together, it is a 1 + 1 = 5 equation, right? So I think you do want to have that third piece and really clear understanding of like, I know if I get this rate database, what I can do with that in terms of my product. I know that when we combine forces, there's new products we can offer the customer, there's new customers we can go after. And so really having a sense of what's called the synergies, right? It's a consultancy term, but really internalizing and having alignment around, it's not just, there's called a bolt-on. It's not just like, oh, we're going to bring over this company and they're going to, ride sidecar and not really, it's like, oh, together, I really see how we can provide more, an exponential amount of value. So I think those sort of 3 things of capital, resources to integrate, and clear understanding of what the accelerant or multiplier effect of coming together is.
So it's like building a family almost.
Like that. Well, my acquisitions don't cry like my children do. So, I don't know. I think acquiring might be an easier thing than raising children sometimes, but
makes sense. Now, something I'm deeply curious about is that, you have a lot of data and AI is becoming big. And we all know that AI will do well in areas where there is some high quality data.
Yep.
And so I'm curious, do you work with AI? And, how do you think the industry, energy plus AI, is generally shaping up?
Yes, it is. Boy, it's like, we about 5 years ago, we were talking about the blockchain and energy and how the
Yeah.
blockchain, that was like 2 years of, our lives. And everybody's talking about AI. And we were actually we were all together at a sales summit last week in the US, and it's on everybody's mind. Everybody's talking about it, which I think is great because it's going to mean there's a lot of creativity going on. So yes, we have a very unique and interesting data set. If you sort of just multiply, we're pulling 2 million bills, which we've said publicly. We're reading, hundreds of points of data on those bills, and we have a huge energy database that is pretty interesting and can do a lot of, can tell and do a lot of interesting things. And so there's a huge opportunity for AI to be, I'm going to say, a partner in that. Like, it's weird. It's not an actual person, but I definitely, there's an opportunity to accelerate some of our analysis, insights, the value we give a customer, right? Because you can give a customer data, but ultimately you want to give a customer a path to action, right? So that's really where you create value, is like,
Yeah.
what do I do with all this? Okay, great. I have 1 billion points of energy data. What does that mean? What do I do with it? And so, the value we want to provide is intelligence on top of ones and twos, zeros, ones and twos, right? Zeros, ones and twos by themselves don't move the world, but some sort of intelligence where it like enables people to act is what changes, moves the world.
Okay.
So AI can be a partner in that and help us there. I think that, the energy sector in general, it'll be, what's interesting to me is I always go back to sort of energy is a unique sector in that you have these monopoly industries, these monopoly utilities that by design are siloed. So globally, people are, you have utility that's constrained to state boundaries in the US, to sort of, I actually don't know how India is, if you guys have, it's territories of sort of utilities, but I don't know if it's states or how compressed they are.
I mean, there can be a utility serving multiple states, but they don't talk to each other. They're all in
Okay.
silos. Yeah.
So it's the same principle as, and that's the same in Europe and, the US. And so what is interesting about energy is, it's not, AI can't skip in the same way it might in other, it can't sort of bring together in the same way it might in other industries. Because, you're going to have utilities that have basically closed sets of their own information, their own desires, their own sort of stuff. And so maybe you get a little bit of optimization within that utility, but how does it kind of jump out of that utility to go global? And maybe it's on a platform like Arcadia, right? Like maybe Arcadia is the data platform that can really unleash some unique insights and actionable, actionable pieces and value. But that's what I think is kind of the tension is you have basically closed systems. You have 10,000 closed systems. And I think AI operates better in open systems where it can go, take lots of information. And so I think there'll be sort of a interesting tension in the energy market of what you do with something that can't sort of get out of the silo.
But I'm actually curious, if two utilities interact, the data interacts, then what will happen?
So, in the US about 15 years ago, there was something called Green Button Data, which was an initiative by the Obama administration to basically ask utilities to expose their data and like give it to customers and just make it public. About 4 utilities have done that in the US in the last 15 years. So I think that it's just they don't get enough value from it right now to build those sort of connections. That's not their bread and butter is putting poles and wires in the ground and having a safe and reliable transmission and distribution grid, which is a wonderful thing that makes us, operate as a society, but they're not yet really invested in data connections, or they don't see the value that would come to them from sort of investing in that area.
Makes sense. Cool. And then you also talked about the IRA. I'm actually curious when it was launched versus where it is now. What do you think has changed, and how can a company like yours leverage what our IRA has given all of us?
Yeah, so Inflation Reduction Act, it passed in August. Arcadia's, I'm based in Washington, D.C. We have most of Arcadians are based in Washington, D.C. So for real policy, nerds, it was quiet all summer.
I mean, I
And then
remember I was in the US at the time when it was passed, and I was really excited because, as you also know, Monica,
yeah,
at GTVP,
yeah.
I was actually going to meet her about 10-20 days from then.
Oh,
And
cool.
I just got so excited. I mean, and we discussed this at length, and
Yeah.
I was pretty excited because we wanted something like that in India.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to know what has happened.
So, I mean, it's a $400 billion investment into all
Right.
sorts of the clean energy economy. So it's a massive bill, so different parts are getting implemented at different speeds. I will say for a government bill, we are pleased with how fast it's going. So that doesn't mean it happened overnight, right? Like we're now 9 months in and we're just starting to get sort of some regulation because Congress, the US legislative body, obviously writes the law, but then it has to get implemented. So it has to go to Treasury and Department of Energy to sort of say, like, what do these rules mean? And so we're just starting, Treasury is really starting to publish some rules around, how you claim these tax benefits, how we sort of activate and get these in people's hands. And then a lot of tax credits go into effect in 24. So some went into effect this year and then some go into effect next year. So, I mean, I think in the US, we're seeing actually a lot of investments in manufacturing. So Enel Energy just announced yesterday that they're going to bring all huge solar panel manufacturing to Oklahoma, right? So we've had, there's been some battery manufacturers in Indiana, South Carolina. So you see a lot of foreign investment already coming into the US to sort of have more domestic manufacturing, which was a huge point of the bill.
Yeah.
I also think you're seeing a lot more on electrification. So, domestic manufacturing, you're already seeing some movement, and you're seeing a lot more movement on electrification and how, everyday homeowners, everyday kitchen table issues can really change the world because we have to sort of retrofit and electrify 2 billion machines in America. So I think those two things have really started. And I think it's just going to continue, right? If you have your average consumer can save $4,000 to $8,000 the next time they make an HVAC decision, there's gonna be a lot of interested people in training your HVAC repairman to pitch you on a heat pump. And, states are really excited about these programs because they get some money. So I do think we're seeing movement and traction, and we've seen it first with sort of the transition to some manufacturing and with a broader call for electrification coming in the States.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's exciting. It really is exciting that this could be billions and billions of dollars going into the economy.
Maybe us in India, as we start to use more solar assets,
Yeah.
even ag, many people are now buying solar pumps, etc. Now there are NBFCs, non-banking financial institutions, that are sort of helping with more and better and cheaper financing for these assets. I just feel that the government is seeing this, right? And we need this at scale. So hopefully, since India is an agri economy, the government will really take some measure in that direction and help us there as well. And really take an inspiration from the US. I mean, Modi is traveling to the US soon to address the Congress. Yeah. So
I didn't know.
yeah, that's
and you also, you have 6 times the population of the US. And so, if you all can move even a little bit, your scale is just so big that I think it does it moves a lot of things, even if it's a one step, it doesn't have to be the whole 10 steps, just move one step. And the population is so huge that's a big impact.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Now, moving on to some fun questions. I would love to know, you're a working mother, right? I am actually curious, how does that really impact your day to day? Because I feel like, for example, for my cousin, right? Her baby is 13 months old, and she is now more productive as both a mom and as a professional. And there's so much to learn from her. I'd love to know what you've been doing, and how has your journey been?
Yes. So we have two girls, 9 and 5. So I am fortunate that I no longer have to, change diapers, do strollers. So we're actually it's a really fun time
Right.
period. But Arcadia's, our 9-year-old has basically been with us on this whole journey of
Yeah.
startup land. So, I don't know if there's a formula or something that works for everybody. I will say the pandemic has been, I'm an extroverted working mom, which means I very much miss the office culture. However, I completely appreciate, I'm talking to you from my home right now. I didn't have to commute for 45 minutes. Like those things have really, I think, changed. I think many working moms can relate to the feeling where it's, 5:05, you have 2 minutes to get out from your desk because you got to get to daycare by 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And your heart starts pounding a little bit because someone just walked in and you're like, how do I get out of the situation? And so that's disappeared with sort of a
Right.
more remote culture, Zoom first, is that you have the flexibility to schedule yourself. You have the flexibility to, no one, if you're not on a Zoom call at 5 because you're getting your kid from school or daycare, you don't feel that warm pressure of like, oh, everyone's looking at me walk out early. And so I do think that has been a revolution that working women will hopefully feel as a benefit for a lot of their career. But the flip side of that is you're not in person making connections to bosses who might promote you and sort of champion you. So, the pandemic has changed a lot. I think, I think different working moms can feel differently. I value my kids seeing me work hard, and I value my kids knowing that, I am going to go on a business trip to India and see, 400 staff members of a company I founded. I think those are actually lessons that I don't feel mom guilt. I feel pride. I feel mom pride about, because I hope that I'm giving my girls that reflection of, you can go do anything. Let's not, don't box yourself in, go for big dreams, believe you can do it. So, I don't know though. We have help, obviously. It's a mess over here. There's no perfect formula. There's no perfect
Yeah.
formula.
Yeah. No, great. And, you know, I almost, I feel like if there's some chaos in life, it just makes you happier. At least it makes me happier.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, and there's always chaos in life, so
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah. And so
accept
you
it.
are extroverted, but I'm curious, how many days in a week do you go to work?
So, what's actually happened recently is we actually don't have an office anymore in DC. So we gave up our office. We are now like fully remote. So what's happening is actually I'm traveling a lot more. So I'm going to see my, other senior leaders of the company. I'm going to see clients. I'm going to conferences. So I actually, what's happened is less of a, do I go to an office to see people, and more of like, oh, I'm in Denver or California. So I'm actually on the road more, which is good and bad. It is a lot to travel, obviously, that much, but it's great because conferences are back, client meetings are back. Like you can actually go and see tons of people, which is fantastic. But right now we officially do not have an office that people go into, which I do think will change in a year or two. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, pretty solid. And then, people talk about all their successes, everyone does. But when do you think you failed, and what did it teach you?
Oh, well, I mean, I went to law school and then completely gave up that career after, spending 8 years invested in it, but it turned out that actually I rolled that into something else. So yeah, I think, I'm not sure that was a failure, but it was definitely an unplanned, oh, we got to make something different, because like this is not where I thought I wanted to be, turned out to not be what I wanted to be. And then, in startup world, if you look back too much, you always have to look ahead. I mean, I think that's one of the sort of the distinguishing features of founders and people who succeed in starting a business is I don't actually think about what we did wrong that much. I think about what we want to do. And I actually I think that's a deep DNA thing that allows you, oh my gosh, we've made a million pivots and a million things we didn't think was going to expect it. But I don't focus on those. I focus on like, okay, all the information we have right now, where are we going? What's tomorrow? And I do think that innate growth mindset keeps you going in a way in this crazy world where you're like, what are you talking about? We're going to build a company with hundreds of people doing, millions and millions of dollars of revenue. You don't believe those things if you focus on like, oh God, I didn't do that very well last week, or I didn't do that very well 2 years ago. You just sort of keep the focus on the problems you want to solve and see that as the path.
Yeah. And how often do you step back and reflect on what's going on and where are you headed next? Personally.
I try, it's, I try to do it every day, right? I think that it's a practice of, because the other thing if you're always an optimist, always looking ahead, it means you've never arrived, right? The goalpost is always shifting. And that's the counter of, if you're always in growth mindset, you sort of never, if you don't ever look back, you don't really sometimes appreciate. So I have been trying to be more intentional about the gratitude and the journey and the awesomeness of what this is and what we've built, because, I like to say that there's 2.2 billion electricity accounts in the world. We've connected 2.2 million. So I'm only a tenth of a way there to, a tenth of a percent of where we want to go.
Yeah.
And that's how I get motivated. But it also means you need to sort of slow down sometimes and say, oh my gosh, we've connected 2.2 million utility accounts. That's amazing. Because it's very often too that you're never there, you're never done enough, and you always want to go. And so I am trying to sort of be intentional and feel the gratitude of what we've done so far.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Kate. It was lovely chatting with you and hearing so many very interesting things from you. So thank you so much.
This is awesome. I appreciate it.
Thank you.